5 more minutes. Okay. The document says they want to help safeguard public morality and, above all, avoid exposing young people to erroneous ideas about sexuality and marriage that would deprive them of their necessary defenses and contribute to the spread of the phenomenon. And I think that that's a concern that they have. I think some of it is well placed and some of it is not well placed. But they also talk about violence to the children and the best interests of the child. But so far, I don't think that there have been any significant studies that prove that children of two women who are married and bringing up the child, that the child is going to suffer any more notably than my children suffered when they were living with me and my wife, where we were a heterosexual couple. As a matter of fact, my wife and I were divorced, and the children were all of a sudden in a single-parent household. Was that good for the children? No. So there's no guarantee that even a heterosexual marriage will be great for the kids. Half of the marriages in this country are ending up in divorce. And society is concerned about that, and therefore, when the Pope and his bishops argue against the upset of society if we allow gay marriage, you must understand where they're coming from. They're very traditional, and they have kind of skewed idea of sexuality. They fear sex, for one thing. They became celibates partly because they feared sex. And they have a funny equation that sex equals evil equals women. And so that's one of the reasons they don't want women priests. Well, I only have a couple more minutes, and we'll answer some of your questions afterward, but I do have to point out that the Pope is being argued against by a Jesuit in Australia named Frank Brennan, who is a lawyer and one of the top Jesuits in Australia, who just wrote a piece on March the 9th, which isn't very long ago, in which he says, I remain of the view that we should not extend the definition of marriage to include same-sex unions, that we should legislate to recognize same-sex unions, and that we should leave questions about the legal availability of new technologies for the creation of children by same-sex couples for determination at a later date. In general, he says, although there's never been an ideal time when all children were born into a marriage, we have maintained marriage as the ideal institution for the raising of children by their biological parents. And that's pretty much what society, even in the United States, thinks today. In general, we like to think that kids are going to grow up with a mom and a dad, and that's good. Is it better than a child growing up in a household that is partnered by two women or by two men? The answer is we don't know. We have to see. But Father Brennan says, in opposition to the Pope, there are homosexual persons who enter into loving, faithful, and committed relationships. These persons should be able to live in society free from discrimination, without state interference, and with state support and approval. They should enjoy the same state protection as de facto couples enjoy under existing state and territory laws. It is very difficult to characterize such a law giving this non-discriminatory protection to same-sex couples as, quote, and he's quoting the Pope, so harmful to the common good as to be gravely immoral. He really pins the Pope down on this. I don't think in any kind of an open dialogue, the Pope or any of his minions, including the Bishop of Phoenix, Tom Olmsted, could defend that proposition. So all I can say is there is no single church view on this. There are thinking Catholics who oppose people like Benedict XVI and our bishop here in Phoenix, who are so adamantly against gay marriage that even Olmsted would send $50,000 of our money to Rhode Island to combat the legalization of gay marriage. So I'll be here for questions. I think I've done enough. Good. Okay. Good. Okay. Thank you.
The second presentation, when that's finished, for about 15, 20 minutes or so.
Sure.
And when that's finished, then we'll open it up for questions for anybody very nice. Senator Kyrsten Sinema, who is here, coming out of a very busy time,
Yes.
and busy all morning and going back to Senate business this afternoon. Thank you, Senator, for being here.
Thanks. Well, I apologize for coming in late and having to leave quickly, but just on the street, the legislature is destroying our state, so I want to make sure I'm not gone for very long. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about my views and the views of some of the folks I represent, both here in Arizona and around the nation, on the issue of same-sex marriage. And for many of you probably know I'm also an attorney, and I focus on constitutional law. So I think what I'll do is start with some of the arguments that have been raised around same-sex marriage from the state perspective. As we know, there are now 5 states plus the District of Columbia in the United States that recognize same-sex marriage. There are several additional states that, while they don't provide marriage licenses to same-sex couples, they do recognize same-sex marriages that have been formed in other states. Maryland, New York are examples of some of those states. Basically, the way that the same-sex marriage fight really started in our country's history was back in the mid-90s in the state of Hawaii. In the mid-90s in the state of Hawaii, a gay couple decided they wanted to get married. They went to a courthouse, applied to be married. They were denied the opportunity to marry because they were an opposite-sex couple. They sued, and the Supreme Court indicated that they did indeed have the right to marry because, in that court's opinion, there was no rational state interest to deny marriage rights to same-sex individuals. And that's an important term, the term rational state interest. That is the crux of the definition that courts use to determine whether or not it's okay to treat one group of people differently than you treat another group of people. In the United States, we have the 14th Amendment, which, as you know, currently, the 14th Amendment provides equal protection and due process to all individuals. Also, incidentally, separate from this debate, it says if you're born in this country, you're a citizen. That's under debate today, too, at the state capitol. But the Equal Protection Clause says that any two people who are similarly situated